From the Carrier Dome in Syracuse, New York, to the PPL Center in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and even in our own backyard here in Hamden, we've analysis on everything in the week that was and the week ahead in Quinnipiac Athletics. A hockey expert and a basketball guru joined me on set who know each other quite well. It's going to get heated. The debate starts now. Thanks for joining us in Studio 125. Jonathan Banks here, ready to control what should be a good one between two Q30 veterans in what could potentially be their last battle on air. Josh Silverman and Kyle Levasseur. Who's going to win tonight?
Yep. Who's going to win?
Well, it's always fun when the two of us are together and on camera. I'm sure it's going to be even crazier. Look, I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. I don't want to be too cocky going in. Got to respect your opponents, but I'm feeling good tonight.
Cal's not big on trash talk. That's something I've learned living with him for the past 3 years. So I know he didn't talk a lot going up there, but he's going to bring it tonight. I'm sure about that.
Good stuff.
Respect.
All right, let's get it going here. We're going to take it up to Syracuse, New York. Josh, you were there as the Quinnipiac Bobcats. The number 11 seed fell to the 6th-seeded South Dakota State Jackrabbits in the round of 62 of the NCAA Tournament. Jen Fay, who went for 25 points in her final game as a Bobcat, talked about how both of these teams play a similar style. Josh, in this contest, what was the one thing that put the Jackrabbits over the edge?
You know, Jonathan, there wasn't really one thing that, to me, that put the Jackrabbits over the edge. For me, it was the height of the Jackrabbits. It was their shooting ability, their ability to just grab rebounds, specifically offensive rebounds. It was just a tougher opponent that Quinnipiac has faced really all season, or at least towards the, not in conference play. No team in the MAC even comes close to the ability of South Dakota State. I mean, they just beat Syracuse on Monday night. So, it wasn't even like they played Quinnipiac well and narrowly got a victory. They just beat an upset number 3 Syracuse at the Carrier Dome. This is a very good team led by Macy Miller. I know you can see on the screen she was only 7 of 18, but that led to 28 points. She had 11 rebounds. That's a double-double right there. She's a phenomenal player, one of the best players I saw in person all season, and it was just one of those games where, Quinnipiac in the second quarter, they went cold. I think they could have gotten a victory if a couple of different things went their way. The refs called a couple of tacky fouls that, probably disrupted their momentum, and just a couple things didn't break their way, and South Dakota State in the end was the better team.
Yeah, you know what, Josh? You've covered this team for 4 years. I respect your opinion on women's basketball. I will call you out if I disagree with anything, but in this case, I tend to agree with you. They're facing a team that's bigger and honestly is the best team that they've faced all year as far as mid-majors are concerned. Definitely one of the biggest teams that they faced. You talked about how they were out-rebounded. Well, they were out-rebounded 49-34. Mia Saland, 6'2", she had 9 rebounds on the day. That's one of the taller players that they've seen all year long. They also had Macy Miller, who just had a day with 9 rebounds. She's 6 feet tall. They couldn't lock her down. They have Edel Thornton, who's one of their best on-ball defenders guarding her. But when Edel Thornton is 5'9", and she's facing the Jackrabbits' all-time leading scorer, who's 6 feet tall, there's going to be a mismatch there. So I just don't know how much Quinnipiac could have done. They really had to play their A game if they wanted to beat South Dakota State. And if you look at it, it was an 11-6 draw. I mean, you're not expected to win those type of games, especially when you're facing MAC opponents for months, and then you face an unbelievable team in South Dakota.
Well, that was kind of part of it. Was the last 2 years this team has won in the NCAA tournament. They won twice. They made it to the Sweet 16 2 years ago. So them losing, you could look at it as a disappointed season, but plenty of 11 seeds win. Plenty of higher seeds lose all the time. So, it was just a tough way for their season to end.
Yeah, and Josh, you made a point there, what you said at the beginning when you're talking. No team in the MAC comes close to the ability of South Dakota State, so that's kind of a good segue into our next question, because the Quinnipiac Bobcats have dominated the MAC in the last few seasons. They ended this year on a 52-game win streak against MAC opponents. That's not a typo. I know talent and skill level fluctuates in conferences between each year, but Quinnipiac has been perennially dominant. They haven't lost since December 30th, and they haven't lost in the conference in 2 seasons. Kyle, I'll go to you for this one. Do you think the MAC properly prepares the Bobcats for the big dance?
Jonathan, the answer is clearly no. The MAC does a disservice to Quinnipiac women's basketball. Look, the best other team in the conference is supposed to be Marist. They beat Marist by 30 points in the MAC championship game. When you're moving on to the next round and facing better teams, you're not preparing yourself correctly. The last tough game Quinnipiac really had was in 2018, December 30th, when they played UCF. They haven't played a tough game in 2019 up until South Dakota State. How are you supposed to really be, quote unquote, practicing for the NCAA tournament when you're playing teams that shouldn't even be in Quinnipiac's league? It gives them a false sense of confidence as they enter the tournament, and they're not continually getting better when they're facing worse competition.
So I disagree with you, and so for a couple of reasons. First off, I think if it was a different team, maybe a team that wasn't coached by Trisha Fabry and led by 5 seniors with NCAA tournament experience, a team that didn't blow out teams, like you mentioned, by 30 points in their conference championship game, I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. So for any other team, it might not prepare them, but for this team that takes every game, game by game, I know that by asking questions over the year, that is their mindset going into every game, that, yeah, all right, the conference isn't very strong at all, but they're so good and they bring such a great scout every game that it doesn't matter who they play during the regular season because they are constantly getting better. They're not bothered by how good or how bad their opponent is. They're working on beating that opponent and getting better within themselves. So they are battle tested. And then my point to you, Kyle, would be last year Quinnipiac wasn't blowing out these teams by as much because this Quinnipiac team wasn't as good as, you know, this year's team was so much better just because people were a year older and just better. So my question to you is, they still won a game in the tournament last year with the conference being as weak. The conference didn't get any better, really didn't get any worse. It stayed just pretty bad. So how did they win a game in the tournament last year if the conference doesn't prepare them for the NCAA tournament?
I think the conference was worse this year, honestly. But also, it wasn't like they were blown out by South Dakota State. It was a 3-point game in the second half. It could have gone either way. I just think they would have been better prepared if the MAC was better.
Okay, but
I disagree. So.
To that point, I think it's safe to assume there will be some amount of drop-off in the team's quality next year with 5 seniors going. That's Jen Fay, Erin McClure, Paula Strautmanet, Edel Thornton, and Brittany Martin all graduating. Josh, I mean, do you agree that there's going to be a drop-off next season when the team hits the hardwood?
I mean, that's a starting lineup. Like, you lose your starting lineup, of course your team is going to take a drop-off. 3 of those players, I think, made cases to be on the All-MAC first team. I know Paula Strautmanet didn't make it. The other 2 players had cases for Player of the Year in Jen Fay and Erin McClure. So when you look at that, obviously there's going to be a drop-off. Brittany Martin and Edel Thornton, to me, are both, you know, second-team players. Edel Thornton is fantastic on defense. Brittany Martin brings a lot of energy and great leadership. So when you look at that, obviously they're going to drop off. But I still think this team cruises through the MAC conference, through the MAC next year with Paige Warfel, Jaden.
You think they're going to cruise through the MAC?
Yeah. You don't?
Josh, the top 5 players as far as minutes that played this year were the 5 players that we just saw on our screens, the 5 seniors that are leaving. There's going to be a complete turnaround next year, that players that really have not seen the court in meaningful minutes next year. How can you trust players like that have played in real competition to go and cruise the conference? Who do you expect to be the starting 5 next year?
A starting lineup of Mackenzie DeWeese, Taylor Hurd, Paige Warfel, Jaden Ward, Shaq Edwards. So many plays. That's still the best line, starting 5 in the conference.
I don't see the depth there. I don't know.
So how you going against that? First of all, they absolutely crushed Monmouth in the MAC tournament. They beat Marist by 30 in the MAC championship game. And you don't think that starting 5 is going to cruise through the conference? They're still coached by the same players. They're still coached by the same people. Still coached by Trisha Fabry and Brian Wilson. How are they not going to cruise through again? Those players are great.
They haven't proven anything, though.
Wait,
What have they done?
Mackenzie DeWeese is the only one that was a freshman this year of the people I mentioned. Paige Warfel is perhaps one of the best rebounders on the entire team. Taylor Hurd can hit a shot from anywhere on the court. How do you not think that they're going to cruise through?
I just don't think you can have it both ways, where you're praising the seniors that are leaving right now, 3 1,000-point scorers, best players in the conference, and now they're leaving, but they're just going to be just as good off. If you're saying they're that good.
But
you're saying they're cruising. By cruising, I guess let's get into the definition of what you mean by cruising. I love to cruise. But do you mean they're going to be undefeated in the MAC?
Yes.
Guaranteed? Undefeated?
I think
because
so.
they were
Kyle,
2 years ago now.
We have to go to break, but I just want to hit you with this
Yes,
quick question. Kyle, how many losses, can you ballpark how many losses you think this team is getting next year? Just ballpark
in
it.
conference play.
In conference play, ballpark
Both
it.
Marist ballpark, 2
Both
or 3.
Marist games, ballpark it, yes.
Yeah, 2 or 3.
2 or 3. Josh, what are you thinking?
Big 0.
Big 0,
No,
big 0.
they don't lose in conference play next year. Now, their performance in the NCAA tournament will definitely not be where it's been, especially with the lack of experience. And I know we got to go to break. We're not going to be here next year, so I got to make this point to Kyle before we go.
Josh just talked about a big 0 in MAC losses. We got a big one here for commercial break number 1. But when we come back, we have more tournament talk with the only winter sport left in action. Keep it here. Back from break and back into action here on Bobcat Breakdown. Now we're going to go to Kyle's side. That's men's hockey. The men's ice hockey team learned their fate on Sunday night at the selection show. Rand Pecknold's squad will be traveling to Allentown, Pennsylvania. They'll be the number 2 seed in a region that they take on Arizona State in the first round of the NCAA Tournament. When you look at the bracket and see the other number 3 seeds, Kyle, were the Sun Devils the best possible draw for Quinnipiac at this point?
Jonathan, this is the best team that Quinnipiac could have faced. And by the best team, I mean this is the most favorable matchup for Quinnipiac. And I talked to Rand Pecknold earlier today. He definitely respects Arizona State. I think it was a Freudian slip that he said it was a good matchup for them, but he said he's excited for the matchup against the Sun Devils. And for a few reasons, I agree. Arizona State, they haven't played a meaningful game in weeks. The last game they played was March 2nd, and their best player, Johnny Walker, hasn't played a game since February 16th. They're coming into a playoff game where they're gonna be rusty, and they're facing a team in Quinnipiac who, from the get-go, always is firing shots on net within the first few minutes. So if Quinnipiac can get out to an early lead in the first 5 minutes of the game, I think Quinnipiac takes it from there. Also, Quinnipiac is very good in non-conference play. They went 11-1 this season when they weren't playing ECAC teams. They also are a great road team. Quinnipiac is 15-2-1 away from Hamden this year. ASU, on the other hand, they struggled when they were away from Arizona. They were a sub-500 team, and they'll be traveling 2,300 miles all the way to Allentown, Pennsylvania. I see Quinnipiac winning this game. Josh, do you happen to agree?
I think you stole my notes. I legitimately, I'm like, all right, he said that. He said, all right, I don't. No, look, here's what I'll say. I didn't speak to Rand Pecknold today, but here's what it is. They have the better coach in Rand Pecknold. They have the better player in Chase Prisky, the best player in the entire matchup, and they have the experience. So when you have those 3 things, yeah, this was the best possible draw. But in playoff time, I will pick the best coach, the best player, and playoff experience over anything else. So they have all 3. I think they get a win. I don't think it'll be very close. I see them winning like 4-1, maybe even 4-0.
I agree with you guys. I do think Quinnipiac's going to win, but we do have a prediction question coming up, so we'll dive into that more. Something interesting about Arizona State, they've been a club team. This is their first NCAA tournament appearance after they've been a club team for 4 years, so something to keep an eye on how they handle their first tournament game. So both teams coming into this matchup are a little bit on different terms. Quinnipiac, we talked about on the show last week, they fell to number 8 Brown in the ECAC hockey quarterfinals in a massive upset. The Bobcats were the top seed. Meanwhile, the Sun Devils sat idle as they are an independent and have not played since March 2nd. Kyle just mentioned that point earlier. Josh, which team's position would you rather be in, not playing since March 2nd or getting upset at home?
I would so much rather be Quinnipiac. It's not even a question in my mind. First of all, when you say Quinnipiac, you're implying, at least that's how I interpreted the question, is everything that comes with it. So again, you're being coached by Rand Pecknold, who just he just won his 500th game as a head coach. You get to play here in a program that has such a storied past, and you get everything that comes with it. You get a season that has had highs and lows, which means the team has had to overcome adversity. Would I rather be the team that's better coming into the game or the team that hasn't played since March 2nd? The team who's only his 4th year being removed from being a club team? No disrespect. But that's just a fact. I would rather be Quinnipiac 11 times out of 10. It's not even a hard decision for me.
This is Arizona State's first time in the NCAA tournament. The first time you tend to do something, you're going to get burned. It's like when I go and grill a hamburger back at the house, Josh. I'm going to burn it the first time I do it before I make a good burger. Speaking of which, we are out of propane, so we got to go get some. Okay. Anyway, I think Arizona State, they might be a couple years away from winning their first NCAA game in the tournament. They've had a fantastic regular season. It's really a Cinderella story. But they're facing a team that's been to 2 Frozen Fours, a team that is out for blood right now. Chase Prisky just missed the series against Brown, and he's coming back with a vengeance. I think they have their best player back. He's going to be ready, and Quinnipiac is going to be firing on all cylinders.
When I saw men's hockey on the rundown, Kyle, I didn't expect to hear anything about propane and you grilling burgers, so... That's an interesting one, but to another point, this matchup features some of the top players in the country. Both goaltenders were nominated for the Mike Richter Award given to the best goaltender in the nation. Arizona State boasts the best goal scorer in the country, and Quinnipiac has a Hoey Baker finalist. Kyle, what key matchup will you think will decide this game?
Yeah, you know what, Jonathan? I'm going to be looking a lot at Johnny Walker, Arizona State's leading goal scorer. He has 23 goals this year, and as I said earlier, he hasn't played since February 16th. Because he was injured for the final series of the year against AIC, and because Arizona State is an independent team, they don't play in the conference playoffs like other teams. That's another point. Arizona State, they've never played in any type of playoff, no conference playoffs, no NCAA playoffs, so this is their first playoff game as a Division I program. But anyway, back to the key matchup. Johnny Walker versus the Quinnipiac's goaltender, Andrew Shortridge. Shortridge has been the best goalie all year long in the entire nation. He has the best save percentage and goals against average. But recently, he's been playing worse hockey than he did at the beginning of the year. So I think he's going to have something to prove. His last shutout was February 8th. He didn't have a great weekend against Brown, obviously, as they blew the lead in the third period in both games. And he's going to be facing one of the most elite goal scorers that they've seen all year long. Rand Pecknell compared Johnny Walker today as a little bit of a less skilled Sam Annis. Now, we both saw Sam Annis play our freshman year, one of the best player I've seen come through Quinnipiac, so that's saying a lot. If Shortridge can shut down Johnny Walker with that amazing glove that he's had all year long, I think the Bobcats will be in good shape.
Now, Kyle, I'm going to go a different way, and mine is not a matchup, it's more a person, and my answer is Chase Prisky. Like Kyle, when he burns his hamburger, Chase Prisky is hungry, right? He missed last week due to suspension, and we saw what this team was like without Chase Prisky. Now, I'm no hockey expert, but I know that when you take away the best player, you're bound to have to overcome that, and they weren't able to. Chase Prisky saw what that was like to watch his team be out there. He knows now what it's like to not be there. It's his senior season. There's no way he's letting this team lose these games. He's too vital. He's too important of a player, and he's just a phenomenal player on the ice, Kyle. He can do so many different things as a defender. He scores so many goals. So when you look at Chase and you look at everything that he brings to the table, both just his leadership and his play, he's the key matchup for me and why Quinnipiac wins, the first 2 games.
He's going to be hungry, and he can't just go to McDonald's.
Yeah, but he doesn't want to go to Kyle's house for some burgers, that's for sure.
You're not wrong.
But just playing off that point real quick, Josh, Chase Prisky was drafted by the Washington Capitals and elected to come back for his senior season to leave a legacy here at Quinnipiac instead of signing that NHL or AHL contract. So Prisky's going to be as motivated as ever to bring some hardware to Hampton.
Legacy is not done yet.
Especially after losing the Frozen Four his freshman year.
Exactly.
Now as a senior, it could be a storybook ending for him as he leaves the blue and gold.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. Now we'll hear what you guys think again in more depth. We broke it down 3 different ways. Now let's hear the prediction. Josh, you said who wins, but give me a little more than that now.
I believe Quinnipiac will be playing in Buffalo in the Frozen Four, Kyle. That's what I think. He will be up there as the beat reporter. I think they win both games this week, and I don't see any way that they lose. Like I said, they have the better coach.
Anyway, I don't know. It's going to be tough. But go on.
Well, yes. But going into each matchup, they have the better coach, the better player, and more experience. I don't look at either of these opponents. Well, obviously, Arizona State is the first game. We don't know who they would play in the second.
They would play Minnesota Duluth or Bowling Green, the winner of that.
Right,
Minnesota Duluth
right
would
now.
be a higher seed than Quinnipiac.
Right. Obviously, I could read the bracket. But
Sure. Yeah.
I know.
I just want viewers to
I know. Just for them.
I know you've done your research. But
So, for me, it's just that Quinnipiac wins these 2 games. I think once they get to the Frozen Four, obviously we don't know who those opponents will be, so I can't make any statement on that yet. But I think this team is definitely good enough to get there, and I think they have the experience to do so.
I think they beat Arizona State. The second game is going to be very tough. It all depends on which Quinnipiac team comes out. If it's the Quinnipiac team that played Brown this past weekend, they're not making it to the Frozen Four. If it's going to be the Quinnipiac team that faced UMass earlier on in the season, beat them 4-0, they will be playing in Buffalo, and I believe they will be in the Frozen Four for the 3rd time. As far as how far they go in Buffalo, it's hard for me to say. I think they might lose in the semifinals. I don't know if they have the consistency to go and win 4 games against 4 very difficult teams.
Josh, you talked about Quinnipiac's experience, but it's hard to argue that maybe Minnesota Duluth might have more experience keeping in mind that they won the national championship last year, so they have a lot of guys with experience ready to come hungry. So if those two teams play, it's must-watch college hockey. But we'll take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about some spring sports. Is that fact or fiction? Find out what I mean on the other side of the break. Thanks for staying with us. Now it's time for one of my favorite segments on the show. I'll give a statement about a spring sport. Kyle, Josh, let me know if it's fact or fiction. On to the diamond. Liam Scaffarello, the Quinnipiac baseball team, was named MAC Preseason Player of the Year. But to say the least, he struggled at the plate this year so far. In the team's first 18 games, he's hitting .177 and has dropped as low as 8th in the batting order. But the stat I want to focus on is strikeouts. He's gone down 40 times this season, so I'm saying this. Liam Scaffarello will strike out 100 times this season. Kyle, fact or fiction?
Banks, you can up that number. This is the easiest question that I've ever heard. He, right now, is averaging more than 2 strikeouts per game as he has 40 strikeouts in 18 games played. He's hitting under 200, which I know we're just talking about strikeouts, but when you're the preseason MAC Player of the Year and you're not even hitting $2, you're obviously struggling to see the ball at the plate. Last year, Quinnipiac played in, let me just get this right, over 50 games. So if he continues on his pace of over 2 strikeouts per game, then yes, he will be over 100 strikeouts. And he needs to pick it up if Quinnipiac wants to advance. He had a rough series at the plate against St. Peter's, striking out a few times. And St. Peter's hasn't won a game all year. They only won 2 games last year. They didn't win a game the year before that. So when you're struggling against teams that really shouldn't even be Division I, then you're having a tough year.
Shouldn't even be Division I. Damn.
St. Peter's hasn't won. They've won 2 games in 3 years. I mean.
So this is a debate show. I'll give my answer really quick. I say it's over 100. I had him penciled in at like 105. So you said way over. They played 56 games last year. So if he strikes out twice a game. So when you say way over, like how high would the number have to be for you to take an under?
You could do another 20 strikeouts, 120.
120 would have to be the over-under for you to take under?
Yeah, close to that. Yeah, 120, 130.
That's a lot of strikeouts, but I think I'd take the over 2 actually. But now we're gonna stay on the dirt. The softball team, they got a new look pitching staff. Casey Herzog, who was the ace last year, graduated. Right now the Bobcats find themselves in 6th place in the MAC with a 5.33 earned run average. The statement here: the pitching staff will find themselves in the bottom 3 of the conference at the end of the year in ERA. Josh, give it to me rapid fire. Is that a fact or is that fiction?
First of all, I missed the whiteboards. We used to do this with whiteboards, but that
takes longer. That's the problem.
What did you say?
That takes longer.
Yeah. Fiction. I say it's fiction. That's my rapid fire answer. I don't think they do, so that's my answer.
It's going to be close. I'll say it's a fact. They're struggling right now. Kendrell Brundrett, their one senior, has an ERA over 8. They have 2 freshman pitchers. One of them has an ERA over 8. That's Brooklyn McGuire. Lauren King just over 4. They're struggling right now. I see them close to bottom 3. So I'll take bottom 3.
Now on to men's lacrosse, some controversy in the offseason, but the team has found their groove in MAC play thus far, winning both of their games in the midst of a current 5-game winning streak. I'm saying they repeat as regular season MAC champions. Kyle, tell me what you say.
I don't see it happening, Jonathan. Right now they're 2-0 in the MAC. Both wins have come at home as well. I just don't see how they weren't able to prepare this season like they have in past seasons with what happened in the offseason. I just don't see it helping them down the stretch when they're really going to need to make a run into the playoffs.
Originally I agree with Kyle, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think this team is going to be kind of hungry after what happened to them in the offseason. I think they're going to want to come out and prove a point. They are 2-0 in MAC play. You did mention that the 2 wins are at home, but that's just how the schedule started. The first 2 games are at home, and they took care of business. You can't fault them for that. I agree with Jonathan on this one. I do think that they come out. I think they're hungry. I think the team is able to rally behind what happened in the offseason, pull through, and repeat as MAC regular season champs.
So this right here is an interesting question. The women's lacrosse team is led by the 2-headed monster of Allison Kuhn and Megan Solowski. Kuhn has 25 goals, Solowski with 18. For those of you keeping score at home, that's 43 goals between 2 people. Right now, the rest of the team has 48 goals combined. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say Kuhn and Solowski, them 2, will have more goals than the entire team added together when the season ends. It's only a 5-goal gap now. Quickly, Josh, tell me what you're thinking.
My thinking is that as long as they're scoring goals, it doesn't really matter where the goals are coming from. I do think eventually the teammates will get more involved and they will be able to find ways to get the ball in the goal. I don't really think that there is any way that 2 players outscore the whole team. It hasn't happened right now. I think it'll be close. I don't think it will happen for the whole season.
It'll be close. The 2 of them are just trailing the rest of the team 43 goals to 48 goals for the rest of the team. And the way that seasons tend to progress, other teams will learn teams' tendencies and shut down the leading goal scorers. So I think the rest of the team will outweigh just those 2.
And if that happens, the other players are going to need to pick it up if they're going to win games. That's the only way to do it.
Well, that's Fact or Fiction, straight facts all block long, but we'll continue now with some final roars. Kyle Levasseur, take his ISO shot.
For college coaches, it's a challenge to have players constantly rotate in and out of their programs and have them quickly learn their system. Quinnipiac men's ice hockey head coach Rand Pecknold has mastered this challenge. Pecknold is set to lead his Bobcats into the NCAA Tournament after just getting snubbed of ECAC Hockey Coach of the Year. Clarkson's Casey Jones won the award, and while he's been great, Pecknold was the clear choice. Surrounded by 13 freshmen, Pecknold just turned around a losing team into the Cleary Cup champs. Quinnipiac ended the year ranked highest in the country among ECAC teams, and Pecknold is largely to thank. If you've ever listened to one of his interviews, you've definitely heard Rand talk about his team's identity. He might not have won the Best Coach of the Year, but after winning 25 games and looking for 4 more, Quinnipiac's identity is back, and I think that's the real award.
Nice job, Kyle. For my final roar, perhaps my final roar, there's only one topic that is on my mind, and it's Trisha Favre, the coach that I first met in October of 2015, and a lot has changed since then. Look, I don't need to recap it all. We know what has happened. The Quinnipiac women's basketball team has made the NCAA Tournament the past 3 seasons, earning 3 wins in the process, while losing to powerhouses South Carolina and UConn. With this season ending, and thus the 5 historic seniors graduating, a new challenge presents itself for the accomplished coach. How does she get a good young core of Paige Warfel, Jaden Ward, Mackenzie DeWeese, and Taylor Hurd, along with others, where they will still dominate the conference and give team fits in the NCAA tournament? It will be tough. or at least tougher, for the team to continue to be as dominant without these 5 seniors. But if anyone can do it, it's Trisha Fabry and her fantastic coaching staff.
When you sit down and look through the rosters, almost every team on campus is losing their best player, leader, or both. Soccer, Rashawn Daly and Jess Gargan, off to the pro ranks in Memphis, Tennessee, and Scotland, respectively. Volleyball, Kat Miller's graduating. Field hockey, Elisa Ruiz-Martinez says goodbye. Rugby will see Emily Roscoff depart, and that is just some fall sports. I didn't even mention Cam Young, Chase Prisky, Melissa Samaskevich, all 5 women's basketball players graduating. Oh, there's also Allison Kuhn, Foster Como, and more. My point here, seniors depart every single year, but this mass exodus of Quinnipiac leaders in almost all sports is something that rarely happens at the same time. Last year, new branding was the talk of the school at the beginning of the fall. Next year, in my opinion, the talk should be how most of the teams here deal with the holes left by the talent that, unfortunately for us, will no longer play in Hamden. Good, healthy debate here tonight, and the coverage continues throughout the week. Kyle, Tom Krasnowski, MJ Baird, and I will be making the trip to Allentown for the NCAA Tournament, and our beat reporters will be flooding your Twitter timelines with coverage here in Hamden. Make sure to follow that Twitter at Q30 Sports and check out our website at Q30TV.com. For everyone on air, everyone behind the scenes, Kyle Levasseur and Josh Silverman, for possibly the last time signing off with me, I'm Jonathan Banks. Good night from Studio 125.